Hello developers, welcome to my video series on Microsoft Flight Simulator add-on workflow. Today we're going to learn about the Virtual File System, or VFS. If you have looked at the Microsoft official folder or the community folder, it just looks different. All these Asobo folders, or if you have some marketplace add-ons, they have Microsoft, Got Friends, LHC, Fly-by-Wire, all in their folder names. Why is that? Well, let's find out. The Microsoft Flight Simulator is an open platform in that anyone can add an add-on to the simulator. Since so many are developing for this popular sim, how do we manage all the different add-ons? Somehow we need to ensure that everyone's add-on is kept separate. And we do this with a specific folder naming convention. Microsoft also needs to keep some order and police how things are added to the sim. They have to be separate, but they also need to be grouped. We have seen that the aircraft go into a sim objects folder, scenery goes into a scenery folder, XML code goes here, HTML, JavaScript goes there. Awesome modules go here and there. The sim program needs to be able to know where everything is. Open the sim and we have a VFS viewer in the tools menu. So we open up that and we have different things we can look at. We can look at the info, number of mount points, directories and files. Packages folder, again you can open up the specific folder that you have. So your community folder, mount points here. Notice the naming of the mount points, and we have all of my community folder stuff here at the top. Actions, not much here. Copy the layout to the clipboard. And then we can browse files, directories, and recursive. I assume that means duplicates. So we have directories here. Achievements are in the fbase achievements file. It's interesting, but I don't think there's really much helpful in the current state that it is. I mean, I can't sort these. I can only filter them. So I could look for panel config, not as a directory, but maybe as a file. Well, there's lots of them, but I can't really sort them or look at them. The sim program would have a difficult time finding all of these folders if the folder structure was left up to the developer. So when the sim runs at startup, it has to put all these individual SimObject airplane folders into one virtual SimObject airplanes folder. It's just better to set up at the start and allow for better performance. All these physical folders, we'll call them, have to be organized into a virtual file system. The physical folder has to be unique, like we said at the beginning, and this is where the company name at the start of the folder comes in. As long as you have a unique name, your folder add-on should not conflict with someone else's add-on. At least that's the theory. What if two developers make the same aircraft? For example, the Gauge aircraft. They have a unique physical folder, say My Company Aircraft, Gauge Aircraft, and My Company 2 Aircraft, Gauge Aircraft project folders. There's no conflict there, but they each have a SimObjects airplane folder with perhaps the same aircraft folder name, Gauge Aircraft. So what happens? Let's make a copy of the Gauge Aircraft project, the whole file structure, but inside the project we'll use My Company 2. You guessed it, we'll change the company name to My Company 2. And remember, the company name affected the full name, and we had a bug issue with missing thumbnails, and we'll fix that. So the company name, change it to My Company 2, and we'll also change the creator here. This is the marketing information when you look in the sim. Also in My Company 2, Gauge Aircraft, we'll open the aircraft config file and change the UI max range to 300. So go down here to the UI max range 300, UI autonomy 3. We'll change the certified ceiling to 12,000. That information will show up on the aircraft selector, so we know that we have the aircraft for company number 2. Also, it's required that you make a unique title for your aircraft. So in the Flight Sim 2 portion, change title and add the 2 at the end of the My Company. So this is the reason that I told you to pick a company at the beginning. You need one for all sorts of places in your add-on. Now this time you're going to build and export both the Gauge aircraft projects. The only difference is the company name, and change the company name in the marketing too, in the creator section. So we can see this in the aircraft list. So what we're going to do is we're going to build and export. We'll select it. We'll export it to the copy. And we'll select this folder, and then we'll build and export it. Okay, put the 2 community built projects into the community folder. One has the folder name of My Company Aircraft Wasm Gauge, and the other one has My Company 2 Aircraft Wasm Gauge. So we're going to start the sim. We start the sim and we go to the world map and we pick an aircraft. Well, let's just make sure we can search for My Company, My Manufacturer, whatever, and we have only one listing. If we look at the virtual file system, look for My Company, we have 2 mounting points, we have 2 directories, but we only have 1 aircraft. We've made sure that the aircraft config was set with a proper unique string for the title. That's all right. We built 2 different community packages. We got a VFS file for both of them. We have 2. Why do we only see 1? Well, the reason for that is we have overwritten one with the other. In the sim objects, airplanes, My Company Gauge aircraft, in My Company 2, and look at My Company 1, sim objects, airplanes, My Company Gauge aircraft. So we have My Company and My Company 2 both with the same sim object. One has overwritten the other. As a developer, you must understand what you are overwriting when you build an add-on. There are too many developers that overwrite core Asobo HTML, JavaScript files, XML templates, and even other developers' files and templates. This can happen with the XML files, HTML, JavaScript, WASM modules. Any conflict there can even cause a crash to desktop. So just be very, very careful and be aware of how you set up your add-on. So what's happening in this case? The sim loads the add-on and it finds them, as we see in the two folders there in the VFS. But okay, that's fine. Which one are we getting? Well, we must be getting the second one because of the fact that we only put the cruise speed, max altitude, range, and endurance in the second, or My Company 2 version. And with looking at the virtual file system, directories, My Company, we see that number 2 here is added, and the mounting point here is in this particular order. So it goes from bottom to top. The last one in takes precedence. So My Company went into the file system first, but then My Company 2 came along and overwrote what was in My Company. VFS Scene 10. So how do we fix this issue? Let's look at what Asobo did. Each of their aircraft have the Asobo company name before the aircraft, so Asobo there. Now let's see what Microsoft did with their aircraft. We have Asobo A320, and if we go way down to Microsoft, Microsoft also has an A320neo. So what they did, sim objects, airplanes, they added the word Microsoft or the company name in front of their project. And Asobo has sim objects, airplanes, Asobo in front of theirs. So that's how you keep things separate. You have to get the name of the actual airplane, give it something that is going to make it unique. And the company name is probably the best thing to help keep your add-ons unique between developers. So what are the rules? Well, there are none, at least not in the SDK documentation, but there should be, especially for add-ons, aircraft, vehicles, humans, boats, airports as well. But that's kind of tricky because in airports, there's only one CYYZ, and if you have another, one has to take precedence. How does that work? So if you bought two CYYZ airports, which one do you see? Well, the last one in the list. So, but how do you make sure you've got the last one in the list? Well, the only way to do that is to actually remove any duplicates. But maybe you're overwriting a default airport. What happens there? Well, there must be something special. Maybe it's the delete airport variable that helps there. Parallel 42 has a good program in order to give you a report of your virtual file system. We can configure it. I've unchecked everything so we can scan. It takes a while to scan all the packages and all the files and so forth, but what it's going to do is give you a report of conflicting files, and then you can make the decision of whether to delete the offending project or to keep it there and just live with whatever problems that can come up. This is going to take a while, so maybe we can pause. Okay, the scan is finished. It's giving me some existing ones that I have. Nothing really there. Our gauge aircraft didn't overwrite any core files. If we look at the overview though, let's see what we got. Anything? Ah, yes, down at the bottom. The My Company aircraft is overwriting all of my files. So it just gives you a warning here that my company and my company 2 are in conflict. Okay, let's fix our two projects. We don't need to do anything to the first one. We'll just leave Gauge Aircraft as my company. In the assets, we're going to change my company too. So what we've done here is in the SimObject asset, go into the inspector, and I'm going to change where it gets the files from, my company too. You don't really have to do that, but you keep things consistent. And I'm going to push everything to a My Company 2 under Airplanes in the SimObjects folder. And then we basically will build the project, or what we'll do, is we'll create a export, and we'll do the same thing we did before. So rebuild and look at the Gauge Aircraft in the Content Manager again. Let's see what we got. Content Manager, my company. So we have two Gauge aircrafts. I've added some more information here to distinguish a little bit more between the My Company version and the My Company 2 version. Go back and now let's have a look at what we have in the aircraft selection for My Company. And look at that. Whoops. Look at that. We have two versions of the same aircraft, My Manufacturer Gauge Aircraft, My Manufacturer Gauge Aircraft. And remember, in the My Company 2 version, we added the max altitude, but we did not do anything to the My Company version. So I have two aircraft now that are the same aircraft, but they're two different projects for me to select from. Look at the Microsoft aircraft A320neo. So we've got all of this. We've got SimObjects, we've got resources, we've got model behaviors, HTML, UI, effects, data, etc. Each one of these folders is a core type folder. It's a special folder like SimObjects, airplanes has to have this configuration of those two folders. Model behaviors will have that, and then they'll have something underneath that. Here we've given Microsoft the identifier of the next folder, so everything doesn't conflict with any of Asobo's model behavior information. Asobo has not really done anything with their Neo other than they have a SimObjects airplane and the Asobo version. The Gauge aircraft is only a small example of the potential conflicts that can happen. You have the effects, the HTML model behaviors, along with the aircraft files. Well, before we close, let's look at the folder structure of some airports and scenery. Here we have Billy Bishop. Basically, you've got a scenery folder as one of the key folders, and then you've got the BGL for CYTZ. I was talking before, what happens if you have a duplicate of CYTZ? There has to be a way to do that, and hopefully the delete aircraft will help with that. But there has to be some way to make sure that your airport is the last one in so that it can overwrite this BGL or just add to it. Let's look at a bush trip, similar type thing. We'll look at a bush trip. The key folder there is missions. Asobo has their mission, bush trips, Alaska, and all of the information that is required for that. Don't overwrite an Alaska bush trip with your own by using a similar folder structure. So I think you get the idea now. Try to keep things straight, and a way to do that is to ensure that you have a company somewhere in that folder structure that will make yours unique from somebody else. Well, there you have it, a look at the virtual file system. Just be careful in releasing your aircraft or your add-on to the world. Make sure that you don't overwrite somebody else's or any of the default information. In our next episode, we'll look at PBR textures. They're physics-based rendering or physically based rendering. Anyways, the theory behind that and why we use PBR textures. We will also discuss the Microsoft Flight Simulator materials that you use in Blender. Well, good luck and see you next time.